My brothers and sisters, have you ever looked back on your life and realized how much you tolerated? How many times you ignored the warning signs? How often you convinced yourself that what was breaking you was just a part of life? I need you to hear me today. I need you to feel these words deep in your soul, because too many of us are walking through life blind, not physically, but spiritually. We are tolerating pain, tolerating disrespect, tolerating sin and calling it normal. But the truth is, the enemy doesn't come into your life with a loud roar. He comes in with whispers. He comes in with distractions. He comes in dressed as comfort, disguised as love, masked as opportunity. And before you know it, you're knee deep in something God never intended for you. Lord, open my eyes. Open my eyes to the things that are pulling me away from you. Open my eyes to the habits I've accepted that are keeping me bound. Open my eyes to the people around me who do not have my best interest at heart. Lord, let me see, because I am tired of making the same mistakes, tired of the same cycles, tired of feeling empty when I know I was created for more. Life has a way of moving so fast that we rarely stop to question what we are allowing into our hearts, minds, and spirits. We wake up each day, go through our routines, and push forward without considering whether the life we are living is the life we are meant to live. But deep inside, there's a voice, a quiet whisper that asks, is this truly what God has for me? That whisper is often drowned out by the noise of our distractions, responsibilities, and the expectations of others. Yet when we take a step back and truly reflect, we begin to see the patterns, the cycles, and the areas where we've compromised. We start to recognize that some of the struggles we face are not just external battles, but are rooted in what we've been tolerating for too long. The moment we slow down and ask God to reveal the truth, we step into the beginning of real transformation. Reflection is not easy because it requires honesty. It forces us to look at ourselves without the filters of excuses and justifications. We often tolerate things because they feel comfortable or familiar, even when they are damaging us. That toxic friendship, that unhealthy relationship, that habit we keep telling ourselves will break one day. All of these things stay in our lives because we don't take the time to truly reflect on their impact. But when we pause and allow God to open our eyes, we begin to see how much we have settled for less than his best. We see the moments we stayed silent when we should have spoken up, the times we allowed fear to keep us from stepping into our purpose, and the ways we have been spiritually asleep. This awakening is uncomfortable at first, but it is necessary. It is only when we acknowledge what we have tolerated that we can begin to change it. When we reflect, we often realize that we have accepted things we once swore we never would. How did we get here? It didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, over time, through small compromises. We allowed a little negativity here, a little sin there, and before we knew it, our standards had lowered without us even realizing it. We justified behaviors that we knew were wrong. We ignored the red flags. We convinced ourselves that we had no other choice. And the enemy, he loves this. He wants us to stay comfortable in dysfunction, because as long as we do, we will never step into the fullness of what God has for us. But God is calling us to wake up. He is calling us to stop tolerating what is keeping us bound and step into a life of spiritual clarity and purpose. It starts with reflection, with looking at ourselves and saying, enough is enough. Too many of us have been asleep to the truth. We've been living in survival mode, simply going through the motions, unaware of how much we are sacrificing in the process. We tolerate disrespect from others because we don't believe we deserve better. We stay in environments that drain us because we're afraid of stepping into the unknown. We hold on to relationships that no longer serve us because we fear being alone. But when we take a moment to truly reflect, to invite God into our thoughts and ask him to open our eyes, we begin to see that we are not victims of circumstance. We are children of God with the power to choose differently. We have the ability to walk away from what is harming us. We have the strength to break free from the patterns that have kept us stuck. The question is, are we willing to face the truth? Self-reflection is not about guilt or shame. It is about awareness. It is about seeing things as they truly are and deciding that we will no longer turn a blind eye. When God begins to open our eyes, we start to recognize the unhealthy cycles we have been caught in. We see the way we have allowed fear to dictate our choices. We notice the distractions that have kept us from spending time in prayer, from seeking God's presence, from growing in our faith. And once we see these things, we cannot unsee them. That is the power of awakening. It changes the way we think, the way we move, the way we interact with the world. It forces us to be intentional about what we allow in our lives and to make choices that align with the purpose God has placed within us. There is something freeing about self-reflection, even though it can be painful. When we finally acknowledge what we have been tolerating, we regain our power. We take back control from the enemy who has tried to keep us blind. We no longer settle for things that do not align with God's plan. We start to say no to what is toxic and yes to what is life-giving. We become more aware of our triggers, our temptations, and the things that pull us away from God's presence. And as we become more aware, we also become more disciplined. We begin to set boundaries, not just with others, but with ourselves. We choose to walk in wisdom rather than impulse. We no longer allow our emotions to lead us into situations that compromise our faith. This is the beginning of true transformation. Many of us have been praying for God to bless us, but we have not taken the time to reflect on whether we are in a position to receive those blessings. We want new doors to open, but we haven't closed the old ones that are tied to our past mistakes. We ask for peace, but we continue to tolerate chaos. We ask for clarity, but we avoid sitting in silence long enough to hear God's voice. Reflection forces us to ask the hard questions. Am I truly ready for the things I am praying for? Have I done the internal work to prepare for the next season of my life? What habits, mindsets, or relationships am I holding on to that could be blocking my blessings? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary if we truly want to step into the life God has for us. When God begins to open our eyes, he doesn't just show us what we need to walk away from. He also reveals what we need to embrace. He shows us the strength we didn't know we had. He reminds us of our worth, our identity, and the promises he has spoken over our lives. He gives us the courage to stand firm in our faith, to walk boldly in our purpose, to reject anything that does not align with his will. But this kind of awakening only happens when we are willing to be still and listen. It requires us to humble ourselves before him, to admit that we do not have all the answers, and to trust that his plan is greater than anything we could ever imagine. It is in this space of reflection and surrender that true change begins. The reason many people never break free from their struggles is that they refuse to pause and reflect. They keep moving, keep distracting themselves, keep making the same choices, hoping that things will change on their own. But transformation doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we are intentional about looking inward, about examining our hearts, about asking God to show us what needs to change. It is a daily process, a commitment to self-awareness and spiritual growth.